Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The hammer struck marble at 4:47 a.m., shattering more than stone. Marcus Chen stood in his freezing garage workshop, staring at the wreckage of 3 months' labor. Dust settled like ash around his feet. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the realization that he'd destroyed his own work. Again, this wasn't supposed to be his life. At 34, Marcus had accumulated an impressive collection of almost successes. 7 businesses started, none lasting beyond 18 months. 12 gym memberships, abandoned after promising beginnings. A novel with 43 different first chapters. A marriage that crumbled when his wife finally said the words that still echoed, "You're brilliant at starting things, Marcus, but you've never finished anything that mattered." She'd moved out 2 years ago. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday. Tonight, standing among marble fragments, Marcus felt something shift. Not motivation. He'd felt that countless times. Not inspiration. That flame had burned and died too often to count. What he felt was darker, rawer, desperation mixed with clarity. He was running out of time to become the person he'd promised himself he'd be. The sculpture he'd just destroyed was meant for the Riverside Art Competition, a showcase that could change everything. First prize included a gallery exhibition, $20,000, and, most importantly, validation that he wasn't delusional for calling himself an artist. Submission deadline, 90 days. Marcus looked at the clock, 4:51 a.m. He'd been working on that piece since 2 a.m., trying to force genius through exhaustion. The same pattern that had defined his entire existence, sporadic bursts of intense effort followed by crushing disappointment. His phone buzzed, a text from his younger sister Maya. "Coffee at 7, need to talk." Marcus knew what she wanted to discuss. Their father had suffered a stroke last month. The medical bills were mounting. Maya, a single mother working 2 jobs, needed help. Real help. The kind that required money Marcus didn't have, and stability he'd never demonstrated. He swept up the marble dust as dawn broke through the garage window, each stroke of the broom feeling like an admission of failure. But something was different this morning. Maybe it was exhaustion stripping away his usual defenses. Maybe it was the accumulation of every broken promise he'd made to himself. Whatever the reason, Marcus made a decision that seemed almost mundane in its simplicity. He would show up tomorrow at 5 a.m. and start again. Not with passion, not with a grand vision. Just show up. The coffee shop smelled like burned beans and broken dreams. Maya sat across from Marcus, her nursing scrubs wrinkled from a night shift. Dark circles under her eyes made her look older than 29. She stirred her coffee with the mechanical precision of someone too tired to taste it. "Dad needs surgery," she said. "The insurance covers 60%. We need 43,000 for the rest." Marcus felt the familiar weight of inadequacy settle on his shoulders. "How long do we have?" 3 months, maybe 4. After that. Maya's voice cracked. She cleared her throat, pulled herself together with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to compartmentalize grief. "I'm picking up extra shifts. I'm asking everyone in the family to contribute what they can." "I'm working on something," Marcus said. The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Maya's expression shifted, not to anger, but to something worse. Pity. "You're always working on something." The truth landed like a punch. They finished their coffee in silence. When Maya left, Marcus sat alone for another hour, watching strangers come and go. Each person seemed to move with purpose, heading somewhere that mattered, contributing to lives that continued beyond themselves. He thought about his father, an immigrant who'd worked in a shoe factory for 37 years. Same building, same shift, same lunch at the same time. Marcus had always pitied that life, the monotony, the lack of adventure, the grinding repetition. Now he wondered if he'd misunderstood everything. His father had raised 3 children, paid for their education, bought a home. Not through genius or inspiration, but through showing up at that factory every single day for nearly 4 decades. Marcus opened his phone and set an alarm. 5:00 a.m. Workshop. No exceptions. Then he went home and slept. Day 1, he arrived at the workshop, tired but determined. He selected a new block of marble, smaller than his previous attempt. More manageable, he sketched a design, not his most ambitious concept, but one he could actually complete. A figure emerging from stone, still partially trapped, half-formed, becoming. He worked for 3 hours, making minimal progress. Every strike of the chisel felt clumsy. His vision far exceeded his execution. Day 2, he almost didn't go. The bed felt warm. His body ached. What was 3 hours of mediocre work going to accomplish? He went anyway. Day 3, he questioned the entire enterprise. The sculpture looked worse than he'd imagined. Amateur. Derivative. Why was he torturing himself? He went anyway. By day 7, something unexpected happened. Nothing dramatic, no breakthrough, no sudden improvement. But the routine itself became easier, not enjoyable, not exciting, just easier. His body knew when to wake. His hands knew where the tools were. The garage didn't feel quite so cold. The sculpture was still terrible, but it existed. It was further along than anything he'd destroyed. Week 2 introduced new challenges. His initial enthusiasm, even the grim determination of that first morning, began to fade. This was the phase where Marcus had historically quit everything, when novelty wore off and reality set in, when the gap between vision and execution became painfully obvious. He'd abandoned his novel at this exact stage, closed his last business when the mundane operations replaced the excitement of launching, stopped going to the gym when workouts became routine rather than revolutionary. This time, when the alarm went at 5 a.m. on day 9, Marcus felt nothing. No motivation, no inspiration, just the neutral fact of the alarm itself. He stared at the ceiling for 3 minutes. Then he got up. In the workshop, he made a rule. 3 hours, no matter what. Even if he spent the entire time staring at the marble, even if he made mistakes, even if he accomplished nothing visible. Just 3 hours. Day 12 brought a small victory. He completed the rough shape of the figure's torso. It wasn't beautiful, but it was recognizable. Progress. Day 15, he ruined an entire section by cutting too deep. 2 days of work destroyed in one careless moment. Day 16, he repaired what he could and continued. Week 3 was when people started noticing. His neighbor, Mr. Kowalski, commented on the light in the garage every morning. "You working on something?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Every day I see that light. Same time." "Yes." Mr. Kowalski nodded slowly, a smile creeping across his weathered face. "Good. That's good." Such a simple exchange. Yet it mattered. Someone was witnessing his effort. The commitment was no longer invisible. Maya called on day 23. "You sound different." "I'm tired," Marcus admitted. "I've been getting up early." "For your sculpture?" "Yes." A pause. "For how long?" 23 days straight." Another pause, longer this time. When Maya spoke again, her voice carried something Marcus hadn't heard in years when she talked about him. Hope. Keep going. By day 30, the sculpture had definition. Features emerged from the marble, a face turning upward, hands pushing against stone, legs bent in effort. The figure was fighting to free itself. Marcus stood back and evaluated his work. It wasn't masterpiece level, but it was honest, real. Something that existed only because he'd showed up 30 times when he didn't want to. He took a photo and sent it to Maya. Her response came immediately. Dad would be proud. Marcus read those 4 words 7 times. Then he went inside, showered, and prepared for day 31. Artists call it the desert. Athletes call it the plateau. Entrepreneurs call it the valley of despair. That dead zone where visible progress stops, where effort continues but results seem to stall, where the finish line remains distant and the starting line has disappeared behind you, leaving only the vast middle, the unglamorous, unremarkable, exhausting middle. Marcus entered this phase on day 37. The sculpture had reached a critical stage where each additional detail required exponentially more precision. One wrong chisel strike could ruin hours of careful work. Progress slowed from visible to microscopic. Days would pass with changes so subtle that photographs couldn't capture them. This was the place where dreams died. He knew because he'd died here before. The novel abandoned at 30,000 words when the initial excitement faded and the vast bulk of unwritten story stretched ahead. The business closed when startup adrenaline gave way to operational tedium. The relationships that crumbled when infatuation evolved into the unglamorous work of partnership. Day 40, Marcus stared at the sculpture for the full 3 hours without touching it. He was afraid. One wrong move and he'd destroy everything. Better to do nothing than risk failure. Day 41, he finally made a single cut. Just one. It took 30 minutes to build the courage. Day 42, he made 3 cuts. This was consistency at its most brutal, continuing when stopping felt safer. His father called that week. Recovery from the stroke was slow but progressing. Your sister says you're working on something. Sculpture? Yes, Dad. That's good. Good work takes time. His father's voice was weaker than Marcus remembered, fragile in a way that made his chest tighten. How long did you work at the factory? Marcus asked, though he already knew. 37 years, 2 months, 16 days. The precision startled him. You counted? A long breath on the other end. Every day I counted. Some days I hated it. Most days I was too tired to feel anything. But I counted because I was building something. Shoes? No. A pause. A life for my children. Every day I showed up was another brick in that foundation. You couldn't see it accumulating, but I could feel it. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his garage with new understanding. Consistency wasn't about feeling motivated. It was about building something larger than any single day's effort. The sculpture was just marble, but the act of showing up, that was building something else entirely. A version of himself he'd never met, someone who finished things. Days 45 through 60 blurred together. Marcus developed routines within routines. He'd arrive at 5 a.m., spend the first 15 minutes reviewing yesterday's work. Then 2 hours of focused sculpting. The final 45 minutes cataloguing progress and planning tomorrow's approach. Nothing about this process was romantic. There were no moments of divine inspiration, no montage-worthy breakthroughs. Just the steady, unremarkable accumulation of effort. But something was changing inside him. He stopped checking his phone during work sessions, stopped fantasizing about the competition or the prize money. The future became less relevant than the present moment. This chisel strike, this angle, this decision. People who'd known Marcus for years started commenting on the change, though they couldn't articulate what was different. He seemed more solid somehow, more present, as if he'd finally landed in his own life after years of hovering above it. On day 52, Maya visited the workshop. She stood silently before the sculpture for a long time. The figure was nearly complete, a person emerging from stone with an expression of determined struggle, not triumphant, not defeated, simply present in the effort itself. "It's you," Maya finally said. "It's supposed to be universal, the struggle to become no." She turned to him, eyes bright. "It's you, Marcus, finally." He understood what she meant. For the first time, his work reflected the truth of sustained effort rather than fantasies of effortless genius. On day 60, with 30 days remaining until the competition deadline, Marcus experienced something unexpected. Joy. Not the manic excitement of new projects or the relief of completion, but a quiet satisfaction in the work itself. The sculpture was improving not because of talent or inspiration, but because he kept showing up. Each day built on the last. Mistakes became lessons. Setbacks became information. This was the gift hidden in the desert, the discovery that consistency itself was the destination, not just the path. That night, Marcus broke his routine. Instead of going straight to bed after his workshop session, he sat at his kitchen table and wrote a letter to his younger self, the 20-year-old kid who thought success meant explosive talent and overnight transformation. He wrote, "Genius is overrated. Magic is a lie. The only real superpower is showing up when you don't feel like it. Do that enough times and you'll become someone you don't recognize, someone better, someone real." He never sent the letter. But writing it marked a shift. He wasn't the same person who'd smashed that first sculpture in despair. Consistency had quietly rebuilt him. Day 73. 17 days until the deadline. Marcus arrived at his workshop to find the garage door open. His heart stopped. Inside, Mr. Kowalski stood beside the sculpture, face grave. "I heard glass breaking around 3 a.m., called the police, but—" He gestured to the workshop. Someone had broken in. Tools scattered across the floor, supply shelves ransacked, and the sculpture? Marcus forced himself to look. A crack ran through the figure's left side, from hip to shoulder, not shattered, but damaged. Potentially catastrophically. The thief, apparently disappointed by the lack of valuable tools, had struck the sculpture in frustration before fleeing. The police came, filed a report, said they'd investigate. Everyone knew what that meant. After they left, Marcus stood alone with his damaged work. 72 days of consistent effort, now compromised. The competition deadline suddenly felt impossible. Starting over meant throwing away everything he'd built. He pulled out his phone to call Maya to tell her he'd failed again. His thumb hovered over her name. Then he set the phone down. For 72 days, he'd shown up. Not because he felt like it, not because conditions were perfect, but because that's what the version of himself he was becoming would do. Why should today be different? Marcus examined the crack carefully. It followed a natural flaw in the marble he'd been working around. Actually, if he approached it correctly, he could incorporate the damage into the design. The figure emerging from stone could have a visible fracture, a scar from the struggle of becoming, not ruined, changed. He picked up his tools and got to work. The next 17 days tested everything. Incorporating the crack meant redesigning major portions of the sculpture. Work he'd spent weeks perfecting needed to be modified or removed entirely. He was simultaneously repairing damage and creating something new. Day 75, he wanted to quit. The crack seemed to worsen with every touch. Day 76, he discovered a technique for stabilizing the fracture, filling it with a careful mixture that would hold while allowing him to continue working. Day 78, he slept through his alarm for the first time. Woke at 6:30 a.m. in a panic. The disruption to his routine felt catastrophic, like missing one day would unravel everything. He went to the workshop anyway, started at 6:45 instead of 5, worked his 3 hours. The world didn't end. Day 80, Maya's car broke down. She needed $2,000 for repairs, money Marcus didn't have. The stress of his father's medical bills, her own financial struggles, and watching her brother chase another unlikely dream was crushing her. "Maybe you should get a regular job," she said. Not cruel, just exhausted. "Something stable. We need help now, not eventually." She was right. He knew she was right. "Give me 10 more days." Marcus said, "If I don't place in this competition, I'll go back to project management, something corporate, stable." Maya studied his face. "You mean that?" "I do." For the first time, he did mean it, because he'd learned something crucial. Failure at this competition wouldn't erase what he'd accomplished. 80 days of consistency had proven he could commit to something. That skill translated to anything. Corporate work, supporting his family, building a different kind of life. The sculpture wasn't the point anymore. Becoming someone who showed up was the point. Day 86, the sculpture was finished. Marcus stepped back and evaluated his work with clear eyes. It wasn't perfect. The crack remained visible, a lightning bolt of damage turned into a deliberate element of the design. The figure emerging from stone now bore this scar, making its struggle more honest, more human. The technical execution showed his limitations. Any expert would spot the areas where skill lagged behind vision. But something else radiated from the piece, authenticity born from sustained effort. This wasn't genius. It was craftsmanship built incrementally day by day, when genius failed to appear. He took photographs from multiple angles, carefully wrapped the sculpture for transport, filled out the competition submission forms, drove to the Riverside Gallery and handed his work to the intake coordinator. "Name?" she asked. "Marcus Chen." She checked her list. "You're not pre-registered." "Does that matter? We have over 200 submissions. Judging is in 4 days. If you're not pre-registered—" She trailed off, sympathy in her eyes. Marcus felt the familiar spiral beginning. Of course he'd forgotten to pre-register. Same old pattern. Self-sabotage disguised as oversight. Then he remembered. He'd pre-registered on day 12, immediately after completing the rough form. He'd learned from past mistakes. Put systems in place. "Check under M. Chen," he said. She scrolled through her tablet. "Oh, yes, here you are. Sorry, different spelling than I expected." She smiled. "Cutting it close, though. You're one of the last submissions I needed every day." She processed his entry, handed him a receipt. "Good luck. Winners announced Friday." Marcus drove home as dawn broke. He'd been awake for 26 hours, but instead of going straight to bed, he returned to his workshop. The space looked empty without the sculpture. Dust motes drifted through morning light. Tools hung in their places, organized over weeks of consistent practice. He should rest, sleep for 12 hours, recover. Instead, Marcus selected a new block of marble. Smaller, manageable, placed it on his workbench. Tomorrow he'd begin again. The 4 days between submission and judging results were strange. Marcus had spent 90 days focused on a single goal. Now, with that goal achieved, submission complete, whether he won or lost, he felt untethered. The absence of that driving force left him floating. This was the phase he'd never experienced before. Usually he'd quit long before completion, meaning he'd never had to sit with the uncertainty of, what if I tried my best and it wasn't enough? Day 87, he woke at 5 a.m. from habit, stood in his garage, unsure what to do. The new marble block sat waiting, but starting a fresh project felt premature. Like moving on before knowing if the previous effort mattered. He went for a walk instead. Port Harcourt was beautiful at dawn, the city still asleep, streets empty, the world feeling full of possibility. Marcus walked for 3 hours, the same duration as his workshop sessions, thinking, processing, understanding what he'd actually accomplished. Winning the competition would be incredible. The prize money would help his father's medical bills. The gallery exhibition would validate years of doubt. Recognition would feel sweet after decades of almost successes. But losing wouldn't erase the transformation. That realization hit him somewhere around mile 4. He'd already won. Not the competition. That remained uncertain. But the battle against his own inconsistency. That war was over. He'd proved to himself that he could commit to something difficult when the outcome was uncertain. Day 88, he visited his father in the hospital. The old man looked frailer than Marcus remembered, diminished by illness and age. But his eyes were sharp when Marcus entered. "Did you finish?" "I finished." His father nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. "Good. Win or lose, you finished. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence. Eventually, his father spoke again. "I never told you why I stayed at the factory so long. You said you were building a life for us." "Yes, but that's not the whole truth." His father stared out the window. "I stayed because quitting felt too much like my own father. He was brilliant, spoke 5 languages, could fix anything, full of ideas. But he never stuck with anything long enough to see results. Died broke and bitter, blaming the world for not recognizing his genius." Marcus felt something cold in his chest. "I wasn't brilliant," his father continued, "but I could show up. So I did. Every day. The factory wasn't glamorous, but it was mine because I claimed it through consistency. Your grandfather had potential. I had presence. Presence won." "You think I'm like him?" Marcus said quietly. "Your father. I thought you were. Past tense." His father turned to look at him directly. "But you're here. You finished something. That changes everything." Day 89. Maya called. "I can't come to the results announcement tomorrow. Sarah has a dance recital at the same time. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Go to the recital." "You're not upset?" Marcus smiled. "You've shown up for Sarah every day of her life. That's more important than my competition." After hanging up, he realized he meant it. Consistency wasn't about dramatic moments or awards. It was about choosing presence over potential, day after unremarkable day. Day 90 arrived. The Riverside Gallery was packed, 200 artists and their supporters crowding the exhibition hall. Sculptures, paintings, installations, months or years of effort displayed for judgment. Marcus stood before his piece, positioned among dozens of others. In this context, surrounded by clearly superior technical work, his sculpture looked amateurish. The crack he'd turned into a feature seemed like exactly what it was. Damage he'd failed to prevent. Self-doubt crept back in. All those days of effort, and for what? To be humiliated in front of real artists? The head judge, a renowned sculptor named Patricia Mendez, approached his piece. She studied it silently for a long time, made notes on her tablet. Her expression revealed nothing. When she moved on to the next sculpture, Marcus felt his stomach drop. The ceremony began at 7 p.m. Patricia Mendez took the stage, speaking about the difficulty of judging art, the subjectivity of beauty, the courage required to create. "This year we received 217 submissions," she said. "The quality exceeded expectations. Many pieces demonstrated technical mastery. But we weren't just looking for skill, we were looking for something else, authenticity, truth, the courage to make work that's honest rather than impressive." She announced the third-place winner, a beautiful bronze piece depicting migration. The artist, a woman in her 60s, accepted with tears. Second place went to an abstract installation exploring climate change. The artist, younger than Marcus, bounced on stage with infectious joy. First place, Patricia said, was challenging to select. Several pieces had superior technical execution, but one work stopped me completely. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was true. Marcus's heart hammered. The artist took significant risks, incorporated damage into the design rather than hiding it, created something that speaks to struggle and becoming without romanticizing the process. There's a crack running through this figure that the artist turned into a deliberate element. It's brave, honest, real. She smiled. First place goes to Marcus Chen for Emergence. The gallery erupted in applause. Marcus stood frozen. People around him turned, searching for the winner. Someone pushed him toward the stage. Walking to accept the prize felt surreal. Patricia handed him a certificate and check. He shook her hand automatically, heard himself say, "Thank you," though he couldn't process the words. When he reached the microphone, he looked out at the crowd. All these people, all this attention. For years he'd fantasized about this moment, validation, recognition, proof he'd been right to pursue art. But standing there, what he felt wasn't triumph. It was gratitude. "I almost didn't finish this piece," Marcus said. "I've started hundreds of projects and quit them all. But this time I made a decision. Show up every day. No matter what. Not because I felt inspired, but because I wanted to become someone who finished things." He paused, gathering his thoughts. 90 days ago, I wasn't that person. Today I am. Winning this competition is incredible, but honestly, I'd already won. Because I showed up 90 times when I didn't want to. That's the real prize. The applause that followed felt different from before. More understanding. More connected. The morning after winning, Marcus woke at 5 a.m. For the first time in 91 days, he had no obligation to go to his workshop. The competition was over. He'd won. $20,000 sat in his bank account. A gallery show was scheduled for next month. He could sleep in, celebrate, rest. Instead, he went to the garage. The new marble block sat where he'd left it, untouched for 5 days. Marcus examined it in the dawn light, considering what to create. This time, there was no deadline, no external pressure, just the work itself. He picked up his chisel and made the first cut. Over the following months, Marcus's life transformed in ways both dramatic and subtle. The prize money covered a significant portion of his father's medical bills. The relief on Maya's face when he handed her the check made the previous 90 days worth it all by themselves. The gallery exhibition opened to modest attention. A few pieces sold. Local media ran a story about the competition. His 15 minutes of minor fame came and went. But the real transformation happened in dimensions invisible to observers. Marcus started a new sculpture immediately after completing his exhibition work. No competition deadline, no external validation. Just the daily practice of showing up at 5 a.m. to work for 3 hours before his project management job. Yes, he'd taken corporate work to maintain stable income while building his art practice. Some days the work felt sacred. Other days it felt mechanical. Most days it felt like neither, just the neutral act of continuing. He started applying consistent practice to other areas. Exercise, not dramatic workouts, just 30 minutes daily. Reading, 50 pages every night. Relationship repair, weekly dinners with Maya, daily phone calls with his father. None of these changes were revolutionary. But accumulated over months, they rebuilt his entire existence. 6 months after the competition, on a particularly cold morning, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Mendez, the judge who'd selected his work, stood in his garage holding coffee. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," she said. "I asked your sister where to find you." "Not at all. What brings you here?" Patricia examined his current project, a larger piece depicting multiple figures in various stages of emergence. "I'm teaching a workshop next month, Advanced Sculptors. I wanted to invite you to demonstrate your process. Marcus laughed. I'm not advanced, you saw my work. Technically, dozens of artists in that competition were more skilled. Skill is different from mastery, Patricia said. Skill is technical proficiency. Mastery is making meaningful work consistently. You've developed something rare, the ability to sustain practice regardless of outcome. That's what I want you to teach. How do you teach consistency? By showing them what it actually looks like, the unglamorous reality of it. She sipped her coffee. Most artists arrive at my workshops expecting secrets, magic techniques, the hidden knowledge that separates masters from amateurs. But the real secret is embarrassingly simple. Show up repeatedly. Do the work when you don't feel like it. Continue when results aren't immediately visible. That's mastery? Marcus considered this. When I was younger, I thought consistency was boring, the enemy of creativity. And now I think consistency is creativity. It's creating the conditions for creativity to emerge. The muse doesn't visit people who work sporadically. She visits workshops that are occupied every morning. Patricia smiled. Will you teach my workshop? Yes. After she left, Marcus returned to his sculpture. But before beginning, he took out his phone and recorded a voice memo, something he'd started doing occasionally, capturing thoughts that seemed important. Day 273, he said to the recording. I've been thinking about why consistency is so powerful. I think it's because consistent practice forces you to confront reality. When you work sporadically, you can maintain fantasies about your abilities. But when you show up every day, you can't hide from the truth. You see your actual skill level, your real limitations. And paradoxically, that honesty is what allows genuine growth. You stop fighting against reality and start working with it. He paused, considering. The competition changed my circumstances, but consistency changed my character, and character lasts longer than circumstances. 1 year after smashing that first sculpture in despair, Marcus stood in his garage with a realization that made him laugh out loud. He'd forgotten to care about being an artist. Not that he'd stopped caring about his work, the opposite. His current project was the most ambitious thing he'd attempted. But somewhere along the way he'd stopped caring about the identity of artist and started caring about the practice of making art. The label mattered less than the daily reality of showing up. This seemed profound enough to share. He called Maya. Remember when I used to tell people I was an artist? He asked. Constantly. Usually at parties before you'd created anything. Marcus laughed. Yeah, I was so attached to the identity. I thought if people saw me as an artist, that would make me one. And now? Now I barely mention it, because I'm too busy actually making art to care if people know I make art. Maya was quiet for a moment. You know what? You sound like Dad. He never talked about being a factory worker. He just was one. After they hung up, Marcus thought about that comparison. For years, he'd pitied his father's life, the daily monotony, the lack of variety, the grinding sameness. Now he understood. That daily sameness was the foundation of everything meaningful. His father hadn't been trapped by routine. He'd been liberated by it. When you stop deciding whether to show up and simply show up, you free enormous mental energy for actual work. Consistency wasn't boring. It was the opposite. It was so efficient it felt boring to observers. All the drama happened internally, invisibly, in the daily decision to continue. Marcus began receiving messages from other artists who'd heard about his story. Some wanted technical advice, but most wanted to know the same thing. How do you maintain consistency? He developed a standard response. Make it small enough that you can't fail. 3 hours felt impossible when I started, but I could manage showing up, so I focused on arrival, not achievement. Some days I'd stare at marble for 3 hours. That counted. Because the habit of presence was more important than any individual day's output. Stop waiting for inspiration. Inspiration follows action, not the other way around. I've had more creative breakthroughs at 6 a.m. after terrible sleep than I ever had waiting for the muse to visit. Track it. I marked every day on a calendar, just an X. That visual chain became something I didn't want to break. Stupid simple, but effective. Find your reason beyond the goal. The competition deadline helped initially, but it couldn't sustain me through 90 days. I needed something deeper, becoming the kind of person who finishes things. That mattered whether I won or lost. Expect the middle desert. Days 40 through 70 are brutal. Progress stalls. Motivation dies. That's exactly when consistency matters most. That's where the actual transformation happens. These weren't revolutionary insights, but people responded to them because they were true. And truth, Marcus had learned, was more valuable than brilliance. On day 365, exactly 1 year after that first 5 a.m. session in his garage, Marcus finished his current sculpture. This piece was different from Emergence. More technically accomplished, more confident, but it carried the same essential quality. Honesty about struggle. He'd titled it The Daily Practice. It depicted a figure engaged in repetitive motion. Could be a sculptor, could be anyone engaged in sustained effort. The figure's face showed neither joy nor suffering, just presence, concentration, the quiet dignity of showing up. Marcus scheduled it to be displayed at a local gallery. Not a competition, not seeking validation, just sharing work he'd created through sustained practice. The night before the showing, his father was released from the hospital. Full recovery, doctors said. Marcus picked him up, drove him home. "Your sister told me about your new piece," his father said. "Says it's your best work." "Maybe, hard to say, but it's honest." His father nodded. Honesty in work is rarer than skill. Takes courage to make things that reveal your actual effort instead of pretending everything came easily. They pulled into the driveway. Before getting out, his father turned to Marcus. "You remember asking why I counted my days at the factory? You said you were building something. I was, but here's what I learned. Some days I could feel the foundation getting stronger. Most days I couldn't, but the days I couldn't feel it mattered just as much, maybe more, because those were the days I had to trust the process instead of my feelings." Marcus understood. Feelings lie. Actions accumulate. Exactly. His father smiled. "You've learned what took me decades to understand. I'm proud of you." That night, Marcus sat in his garage, empty now, all current work exhibited or stored. He pulled out a journal he'd started on day 1. Read through a year of entries. The evolution was startling. Early entries, desperate, dramatic, full of self-doubt and grandiose plans. Later entries, shorter, more focused, documenting specific technical challenges and solutions. Recent entries, barely about sculpture at all, more about the practice of presence, the discipline of showing up, the quiet satisfaction of accumulated effort. He turned to a fresh page and wrote, "Day 365. 1 year of consistent practice. The sculpture I create. Consistency is the quiet force that turns ordinary people into legends. It is the bridge between who you are and who you dream of becoming."